This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham, joined today by Scott German. We're going to talk about the designated hitter, the two leagues, and the different rules in place. In Major League Baseball, big fans of Major League Baseball, and we're both fans of teams in the different leagues. So maybe that's a good jumping off point for a good discussion. We'll also talk another debate point. We'll talk about the ACC basketball coaches and their push to have the NCAA Tournament field expanded again. This time from 68 teams to 72 teams. And I guess let's start with baseball. And baseball season now, I got to say this before we get started on our little debate there, Scott. College baseball season is officially over for me now. I guess over for us. UVA baseball loses on Tuesday in the ACC tournament. First game, they lose to Florida State in extra innings. Cavs will not play in the NCAA tournament. Also for me, then my VMI team that I broadcast for all spring long. Also out of the Southern Conference tournament, kind of surprisingly early. And so there's a lot of college baseball to be played, but especially our Cavaliers not going to be playing baseball. That's a huge surprise, Scott, that this team the national champion just 3 years ago, done after the ACC tournament. Your thoughts?
I just think that the law of averages kind of caught up to them. They were injury plagued all season. Their All-American practically was out for the entire year. They lost some key pitchers. Recruiting may have caught up with them, where they had some recruits that went ahead and didn't go to college, went ahead and signed pro contracts. If you take 15 consecutive years of making the NCAA tournament, that's a pretty high goal, high standard to set. So I don't think not making it this year is all that. Maybe it is kind of a surprise because we've taken it for granted. Let's see what happens next year moving forward, and how Connor can kind of make up for this. But I do have a pet peeve now. Anything to talk about, kind of a something that's a little bit. I'm trying to figure out, Chris, and you can help me. So Virginia's not going to make the NCAA tournament, but they're playing a game today in the ACC tournament, an absolutely meaningless game against North Carolina State. To me that makes no sense, because what about an injury? You've got players on that team that are going to be waiting to be called. Their name's going to be called in a couple of weeks in the Major League Draft. What if somebody goes out and tears an MCL or breaks a leg or an arm or shoulder injury, playing in the game that means absolutely nothing? That's kind of like the discussion we had about some of the UVA players playing in the military bowl. Yeah. Except this is even a more contrasting issue, because you tear a pitcher tears his arm or shoulder up, or a batter tears his MCL, their draft stock's going to plummet in a couple of weeks. I don't get the rationale behind the ACC playing games that literally mean nothing.
Well, it's not the ACC's fault; it's UVA's fault. I would say, if Brian O'Connor, and now Daniel Lynch won't. I guess he won't play today. Maybe he will. He actually didn't start the other day. I would hope for Daniel Lynch's sake. Daniel Lynch, I was looking, Scott, before we got together for the podcast today. Lynch and Jake McCarthy are both top 100 prospects on MLB.com for the upcoming draft in a couple weeks. So, if Lynch goes out and pitches today, and like you say, if something happens, he was listed as the number 92 prospect on the MLB.com list of a top 100 prospects. So that translates to roughly, it could be late second round, early third round pick. You're talking about from a signing bonus standpoint, $400,000 or $500,000 range. He's a guy that will probably, if he's that high of a draft pick, probably ends up being assigned right away to low A. He skips rookie league. He skips that half season low A. He goes straight to the main low A, and maybe by the end of the year he's in either high A or possibly even double A with his stuff, fastball 95 and that kind of thing. Jake McCarthy was actually the number 60 prospect. He had an injury-plagued season this year. Preseason All-American, didn't get to show it this year, but he's back now. He's played the last few weeks trying to get this team back over the hump. Fell short from doing so. But number 60 prospect, he could be a compensation first-round pick. I mean, it's certainly an early second-round pick. Again, big signing bonus. Same stuff with Lynch. He gets assigned to a good minor league team, starts his career. So, yeah, you're right. If either of those guys get hurt, and I'm talking about those two guys being top 100 prospects, there's other guys in the pipeline that are going to get looks from the scouts and from major league teams. So I would hope Brian O'Connor takes that into consideration. This game's meaningless now from a standpoint of helping your team qualify for future play. The way the ACC does its tournament, I actually really like. And every other year when UVA's in the mix for a chance to win a championship, playing the NCAA tournament, that kind of thing, I think this tournament format's really good. The way they do it now, it's 4 3-team pods. You play 2 games. If you advance past that, you play at most 2 more games. So 4 games in a week, and then you get some time off, and then you get ready for the NCAA tournament. Other conferences play double elimination. You play a lot of games in a short period of time. It can really kill your pitching staff. It can really make it hard for you that next weekend when you're in the NCAA tournament to compete because you've really taxed your pitching staff to get to that level. So I like the way the ACC does it. But, yeah, this is the first time in a long time that UVA baseball is in this position of playing a meaningless game in the ACC tournament. Actually, the last time that they played a game like this, finishing their season out in the ACC tournament with no repercussions, win or lose, it was actually Dennis Womack's last year. Brian O'Connor took over in 2003, and the Cavs have been playing NCAA tournaments ever since. So I think your points are valid, but I really do like the way the ACC does its postseason tournament. It's set up because a lot of ACC teams do qualify for the NCAA tournament. A lot of teams playing in Durham this weekend will be playing in the NCAA tournament. Helps them set their pitching up. But, yeah, it's an interesting situation for Virginia because, we don't have any more games after today.
Well, hopefully, and I'm sure games going on now, hopefully there's a lot of younger players getting playing time today that aren't going to really probably be that concerned with getting the name called in the draft over the next couple of days. That's more than likely that's the way he'll play that. But still, even if the game means something to state, that's even more of a reason. You've got one team that's playing it out and not even playing their regular players, competing against a team that maybe needs to win. To me, that kind of compromises the integrity of the entire tournament.
Well, and another weird thing about the way this tournament format's set up, it really doesn't mean anything to state either, because Florida State beating Virginia on Tuesday. So if NC State wins today or loses today, either way, again, it doesn't really matter because if NC State then beats Florida State tomorrow, so let's say Virginia wins the game today. If NC State beats Florida State tomorrow, everybody's 1-1, and because you're only playing 3 games or 2 games with 3 teams, the way the tournament is set up, the highest seed advances to the bracket play. So NC State, as the highest seed, would advance. Essentially, win or lose today, NC State wins tomorrow, they advance to the semifinals. And whoever wins or loses today, if Florida State does not beat NC State tomorrow, they don't advance. So in that sense, it's just a baseball game and a chance, I guess, for the guys to get at bats and innings and that kind of thing for the scouts more than anything else. And there's a lot of scouts there. That's the other thing about this. Before we were talking, I was pouring through some scouting reports for both the Southern Conference Tournament, the ACC Tournament, and the scouts are in droves down in Durham, down in Greenville, South Carolina, where the Southern Conference Tournament is, watching these guys go against each other in that environment. So, the players, they might get hurt, but there are also there's opportunities for at-bats and innings pitched against really quality lineups, opportunities for scouts to get one last look, at some of these guys before that draft in a couple of weeks. So that's the other side of this, I guess, too, for the McCarthys, for the Lynches. It's a chance to have one more chance to make an impression on those scouts before teams make their selections. And those guys are going to hear their names called. It's just a matter of how high.
Yeah, and that kind of jogs my memory a little bit to some years ago. I ran into a friend that's actually on a Major League Scout, and one of the comments, and it was an early game, cold weather, UVA playing a no-name non-conference opponent, and my comment was, what are you doing here so early? And he said, oh, we're here early, we're here late. We want to see who puts the effort out, on a Tuesday afternoon when it's 40 degrees, and we want to see who puts an effort out on the last game of the season when you've got your car packed ready to go home.
Yeah.
They're looking at things that a little bit more. They're looking at those intangible things, I guess, like who's exerting that 100% effort in a game that really has no ramifications on the extent of the season. So, I haven't thought about it from that perspective. I understand maybe the reason. And baseball players want to play baseball. That's what they do. So you give them an extra game. I'm sure if you took the vote, it would be on near unanimous that the players would want to play that game.
That's right. And for me, with my experience, Valley League baseball, the years I got to work in the Valley League with the Waynesboro Generals team, there's those guys, they live to swing the bat, to throw the ball, and so unfortunately for us, this is it. I just checked. We're recording this podcast for those listening shortly after 3:00 on Thursday. The game was supposed to start at 3:00. And I haven't seen that it started yet. I looked at the stat broadcast to see if it has. It's not started yet. So that might be an indication maybe the first game went a little long and they're getting started here a little late. But so I don't know even who's starting for Virginia. If Lynch is getting the start, it'd be a great opportunity for him to get one more chance against a really good NC State team to impress. And Lynch has looked good down the stretch. Unfortunately, not enough for this Virginia team to win more games consistently. But Lynch has looked really good down the stretch. Looked really good against Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago. In that Monday night game on ESPNU. So one last chance to impress, and then it's over. It's hard to believe. Usually we have UVA baseball to talk about until the last week of June, but this year, not so much. So I thought I'd throw one more thing out, Scott, and then we can start with our discussion about the designated hitter. I just saw this news. You might have seen this week. Former UVA quarterback Matt Johns has a job on the staff of Bronco Mendenhall. He's a graduate assistant, one of the new graduate assistants on the program. And I think you and I talked, Scott, about this when Mendenhall took over. Johns, of course, was the incumbent starting quarterback, lost his job, and I remember saying this to you, or maybe we both said this to each other on a drive over to a game. Some guys who face that kind of situation, they lose their job. When a new coach comes in, they get in a huff and they transfer out. They go somewhere else and play their last year. We both said, hey, Matt Johns' career isn't going to be in the NFL necessarily, so, stay in good graces with this coaching staff and you see what happens. Maybe you get a job with them. Maybe they recommend you for a job. We're starting to see that come to fruition. So Matt Johns plays his cards, and maybe this is the next step in his career.
I think you're exactly right, and I believe that's a great addition to Coach Mendenhall's staff. I'll give you another example of that. Ross Matheny, who had a yo-yo career at UVA, never really got a chance to demonstrate what he was all about. Graduated from Virginia and played as a graduate transfer down in South Alabama. Was second team all conference his final year at University of South Alabama. And now has decided he wants to be a coach. He's a very intelligent young man, as I'm sure Matt Johns is as well. Ross got a job as a graduate assistant at Kansas State, got promoted to a full-time assistant at Kansas State, moving up the ladder. He's now an assistant coach at VMI. Sometimes great players, or not sometimes, many times, great players don't always make great coaches, but players that are willing to pay the price to do the work, that's the kind that often become great coaches. And Matt Johns is certainly on track for that. He seems to have that mentality. And I think it's a great addition to Coach Mendenhall's staff, which kind of plays into what the new AD, Carla Williams, is kind of advocating that the program reach out to alumni and get them back into the fold, get them at games, get them in with the team, kind of being inspirational leaders. I think this is right down the the middle of the lane is what she's advocating.
Yeah, also on the staff as GAs for Mendenhall and his staff this year. Jackson Mateo is a guy that we're both familiar with. He played offensive line at Virginia. I remember I got to talk with him one-on-one in depth at the ACC football kickoff a couple years ago. He's back for his second season actually on the staff as a graduate assistant at UVA. And Kurt Garner, also a former UVA player. Now you talked about Ross, Scott. You know how connections kind of work. He got his first GA job at Kansas State. Then you mentioned now he's at VMI. I think he'll be in his second year at VMI. Head coach there, Scott Wackenheim, a former UVA assistant coach under Mike London. So of course he and Ross would have interacted there. And so it's connections, it's keeping your head in the game. And Ross, yeah, I got to talk to Coach Wackenheim a few weeks ago. We were talking about the upcoming season for VMI, and he's high. He's really high on Ross and what he's doing. Ross is actually a safeties coach. He's a secondary safeties coach at VMI, second season there. Also on the staff there at VMI, along with Ross, Albert Reed, former UVA player, the grad transfer from Maryland, played a couple seasons at UVA at running back. So yeah, it's funny how the family kind of thing works. It's knowing who you know and then sticking your head in there. And I know Matt Johns will do a great job. I loved the chances I got to sit down and talk with Matt. Very knowledgeable young man, very, very intelligent and cogent speaker. And so I'm sure having him who worked with Coach Mendenhall, Coach Ane in that in that offensive locker room, game planning and that kind of thing. Having him there to coach players, he fought the wars with them as a player. He knows what they're thinking from that standpoint, and it'll only help as he's working with the young quarterbacks in UVA system that he has that experience.
Exactly. I had a former coach, assistant coach, tell me once about the best thing about a graduate assistant is they often get inside the clubhouse, the locker room, clubhouse, whatever you want to say. They often get inside there because they have played. They're recent players. They know what's going on, and they hear more than maybe even an assistant coach is privy to. And they kind of can get a feel for what the locker room is like, and that's one of the most valuable aspects of a graduate assistant. It's not that they can go out and actually teach. They can still learn the game of football, but they can communicate those things back to the coaching staff because the players are opening up to them a little more because they still equate to them as players. They don't see them as coaches. So I think it's a great hire. A great addition.
One more college thing, and then we'll talk some MLB. The ACC basketball coaches, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, ACC basketball coaches are pushing this proposal for the NCAA to consider to expand the NCAA tournament field yet again. It went from 64 to 65, then to 68. Now the ACC coaches are trying to push from 68 to 72. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this, Scott. I do too. I'll let you start. 68 to 72, good or bad idea?
Well, I guess without having a long time to thoroughly examine it, I think obviously the ACC coaches are advocating it because, as we discussed off the air, a couple of teams last year got snubbed. Notre Dame, Louisville. You can't tell me that Notre Dame and Louisville were good, if not significantly better than some of the automatic entries from some of the lower conferences around the country. So I would imagine that because the ACC is a 15-team league, the coaches are saying this could be something that happens more often than not because you've got so many automatic qualifiers that you're looking at some very good ACC teams, such as Louisville last year, Notre Dame, getting brushed aside. Where if you increase it to 4, you got to think that those 4 extra teams that are going to be coming in there are going to come from conferences, the Power 5 conferences, and probably more likely from the schools from conferences like the ACC, the Southeast Big Ten, maybe. So Yeah, I understand the rationale behind that because you want as many teams in your league in the big dance, and obviously last year there was a couple head scratching teams left out. So I guess on the surface I kind of understand.
I can see it. I guess I'll say this. I equivocate a lot about things. So this specific proposal, I don't like 68 to 72 because I would say, where does it stop? Then do you go to 76? I mean, etc. I guess what I'd say is this. You have these silly other tournaments that you play, the NIT and the CBI and there's another collegeinsider.net or whatever. I mean, you have a few of those. Here's what I'd say. Get rid of those tournaments. Just get rid of them. Let's stop having tournaments that don't feed into a championship. If you don't get to play for the championship, then you don't play anymore. You're done when you lose your last game, whether it be regular season game, tournament game, and your conference, whatever the case may be. But, if there's 40 teams in NIT right now, put those 40 in the NCAA tournament. If they're good enough to be playing in the NIT, let's just roll it all in there together. And that CBI, I mean, that's we covered CBI games. I think we're in the CBI Journalist Hall of Fame, Scott and I, for our work back about a decade ago covering UVA basketball, playing that CBI. If not, we should be because we took a lot of lumps that year having to watch those games. I guess if you're gonna play these games, have them play for a championship. I guess I have the same opinion about football bowl games. If they're not for a championship, why are you playing them? So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do it, maybe expand the field to 128 teams, and then that's it. No more NIT, no more CBI, none of that crap. Let's just have everybody play for a championship. 128 would actually only be one more game because for the whole field you don't have to win. You have to win 7 instead of winning 6 because you're doubling the field. So that's just one more game out of the field. So do it. Get it over with, pull the Band-Aid off, and then stop the other crap, those meaningless games that don't mean anything to anybody.
Yeah, and I see that point too. I'm going to make this comment. It's not going to help my position of saying I'm okay with it. That's why you have conference tournaments. The ACC, the regular season champion in the ACC earns nothing. It's the conference tournament winner that gets the automatic bid. Is that not correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So essentially, for some of these, and this, for lack of a better term, let's call them borderline or bubble teams or fringe teams. If you got teams that at the end of the regular season, on that Saturday in March, first Saturday in March, if the regular season comes to a conclusion, or Sunday, usually Saturday, you got some teams. Let's take this year's team. Louisville, Notre Dame, clearly on the bubble when the season ended. Then you've got to look at the start of the ACC tournament, and let's not call it the NCAA tournament. Let's just say you got to look at the ACC tournament as the beginning of the postseason tournament, postseason play. So Notre Dame and Louisville, they had a chance to punch their ticket to the big dance. All they had to do was win the ACC championship. So essentially, you're not. It's not like football where you're shutting teams out because you're voting on them and you have choosers decide. That's decided on the floor, on the court. So those teams, Louisville and Notre Dame, had either one of them won the ACC championship, then they wouldn't have been left out of the NCAA tournament. They would have played their way into that. So, for the other teams around the country, for the lower level conferences, let's say James Madison, William Merritt, they got a chance to make the NCAA tournament. Their postseason starts with their conference championship because they are guaranteed a automatic bid to the NCAA tournament if they win their conference championship. So, but it's about numbers. It's not about how many teams got left out. And I think that's where the ACC is coming from. We get 4 more teams in the NCAA tournament. Those 4 teams aren't coming from the Sun Belt, the Horizon, the Summit, the Missouri Valley, the CAA. They're coming from Power 5 conferences. Those 4 teams are going to be 4 teams that were once on the bubble. They're going to get in, not those lower level conferences that are going to get one more team. And Southwest Missouri State's not going to get in because you increased it 72.
Yeah, and that's why I think my idea, which I just kind of winged as we were talking here, might actually be a fairer solution. If you're going to expand it anyway, yeah, 4 teams. I mean, we named 2 of the teams that would have gotten bids last year that didn't. Notre Dame and Louisville. Those 2 teams would have gotten bids. Yeah, you're no mid majors, no small conference teams are going to steal a bid away. Maybe UTC, maybe Chattanooga would have, perhaps. They got upset in their conference tournament early, but I mean, even in that 4, I don't think they're part of that 4. But if you expand it, my radical proposal of just throw 128 out there and never expand it again, and don't play any NITs and all those other crappy tournaments. That's going to include a lot of Louisville's and Notre Dame's, but it's going to include more UTCs and teams like that too. And, God, I hate to be the person who says it on this podcast because a lot of UVA fans listen to this podcast, but we saw this year that a team like Maryland-Baltimore County can win an NCAA tournament game against a top seed. And remember, they had to beat Vermont on Vermont's home floor in their conference tournament to even get that game. And, who knows? Vermont wins that game, and maybe the matchup doesn't work very well. They end up playing Virginia and lose by 30 points, and we're never talking about that conference anymore. But those teams can win those games occasionally. And I'm going to have bad dreams tonight for even mentioning Maryland-Baltimore County out loud, by the way. That's just a note to our listeners out there. I'm sure you are too, so thank you for that later. But, yeah, there are going to be more teams like that can win games. And I think, it's never going to happen. I'm not sure the 72 thing will happen. But, I think more teams who are quality teams getting in, the better. And, it's more money for the NCAA. It's more broadcasts. So hell, we get a chance to make more money. But and that's what the ACC proposal is about. Let's be honest. Louisville, Notre Dame make the tournament. That's more money for everybody in the ACC, not just those 2 teams. So it's a money grab, and I don't know if we're going to see anything come of it. But it's got us talking basketball here in late May.
You stole my thunder. I was going to say that if the NCAA adopts that policy and expands to 4-14, you can bet your bottom last dollar that those teams aren't coming from. They're coming from the Power 5 conferences. They're not coming from conferences, teams that you've never heard of, like UMBC. Okay, so so that it's about money. It's a money grab, and the ACC is at the head of the line just about every time. Like all power conferences are. They're ACC is getting ready to launch their network, and so it's just another way to increase revenue.
On another note, the state of Maryland is not one of my favorite places right now. I just remember, okay, so UMBC, and Scott, you texted me a picture when you were driving back from an O's game, and you had a picture of the UMBC sign off the interstate or something like that, and then we had that great time in Annapolis watching that great football game in those cold conditions. So, yeah, I'm going to have more bad dreams even now just talking about that. Annapolis and Maryland-Baltimore County, and I guess you and your O's.
Baseball team, which is from the state of Maryland, is having one of the most horrendous seasons in their entire history. So, yeah, Maryland is not a state that I plan on going to on vacation this year.
Yeah, Maryland don't expect us. Yeah, we're not coming back for a while.
Probably wouldn't have planned on it anyway, but certainly not now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't expect us, Maryland. You can show us all those commercials about going to the ocean and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to happen. So, speaking of baseball, though, and speaking of the O's, in a roundabout way, Scott and I, when we were finishing up our podcast last week, actually after I stopped recording our podcast, we started talking about the DH rule and how weird it is that the 2 leagues have the different rule. And, we ended up talking for so long, I should have kept recording because it was a good discussion of just the weird state of baseball now. And so I thought it'd be good for us to pick that back up and actually record it and share it with our listeners. And maybe folks can, chime in later, email or comment, tweet or whatever else. But, the idea that that these 2 leagues, for the longest time, I guess, what was it, 72, Scott? I think that's right. It's 1972 when the American League put the DH rule in effect, allowing for a hitter to replace the pitcher in the lineup. National League didn't follow suit. The 2 leagues back then, though, were different leagues. They were really distinct leagues for the longest time, but now with interleague play, with baseball's structure really changing in the last, say, 15 years, we still have this weird dichotomy where one group of teams plays baseball the one way, the other plays baseball the other way. Is it time that we finally address this and unify the rules one way or the other?
Chris, it was that the DH came into play in the American League in 1972. So that was 46 years ago.
Yeah, the year I was born. Yeah.
It was time 46 years ago. That's the most, I was reading an article. There's pros and cons. There are fans that say they like the American League DH. There are fans that say they like the National League, the fact that the pitcher does have to bat. But there is no fan that say they like the fact that the two leagues play under completely separate rules. You can't find a fan that says that's perfectly okay. There are fans, like I said, they like the DH, they support it. The fans that say they like to see the pitcher bat, which I can't fathom that. But very few, if any, will say we like the fact that there's that big difference between the two leagues, and it's most people agree it's way time for it to be one way or the other. And we know it's not going to go away. It's going to take a position away. And the MLB Players Association, that's not going to ever happen. So it's going to ultimately happen in the National League. And why it hasn't happened by now, to me, is one of the greatest mysteries in all of baseball.
So, pardon the interruption, has Stat Boy correcting at the end. I was able to quickly look it up. The rule was passed in 1972, but the first DH is actually 1973. So it didn't start playing until 72. But I was born in 72, so the DH is as old as I am. All right, so I wanted to look at this at least from two different perspectives. First, from the team personnel perspective, maybe. And Scott, I wanted to lean. I mentioned, of course, you talk about this a lot. You're an O's fan. You follow the American League closely as a result. I'm a Nats fan. Follow the National League closely as a result. So from the standpoint first, as an American League guy, I'll call you an American League guy. The disadvantage to American League teams that having a DH in the American League, no DH in the National League presents to American League teams. Talk me through that.
It's the disadvantage clearly is always with the American League, because the way that the interleague play is set up, and we'll talk about that maybe, is that when you're playing an interleague game in an American League park, DH is in effect. Well, that's great for National League teams because they can set their pitcher down and put a guy into his batting order that is generally a pretty good hitter, probably a guy that pinch hits. You're getting a pinch hitter some more opportunities. You're getting a utility player, platoon player. You're getting him more at that without having to play him in the field if he happens to be a defensive liability. Flip the scenario, an American League team goes to the National League, and they have to put a pitcher that's rarely, if ever, taken batting practice. He may have taken batting practice the day before his scheduled start. You have to put him out there. You're essentially giving up one of your 9 batting slots. You're also putting him in harm's way, because I'm telling you what, wasn't the greatest athlete even when I was younger. But there's no way I would want to stand in a batter's box if I didn't do it on a regular basis, facing the guy throwing 96 miles an hour and throwing all kinds of nasty curves and sliders and sinkers. The pitchers may not be ready for that speed. They could get hurt. They could get hit. If they were to happen to coincidentally or accidentally make contact, they've got to actually run down to first. They've got to maybe run the bases. It's a huge disadvantage for the American League on all counts. And then we're not even talking about the World Series, where when they go to the NL home park, the NL, again, same situation. The NL gets to use, the American League loses their DH. The NL's back to normal, business as usual. So, to me, it's. I think I gave an example. It's like just an NFC team, but the Redskins came over and played the Ravens in Baltimore in a regular season game, and instead of being 4 downs to make 10 yards, they give them 5. Or instead of the field being 100 yards long, it's 94 or 105. I mean, we're talking about those are the kind of drastic analogies you would make, because it's a humongous difference in the way the game is played and the way the game is coached.
Well, see, and I'll throw out there, I'm not sure if I weigh one as being more than the other, but I'll go through the disadvantages National League teams have in the DH scenario, or not having, in their case, not having a DH. One, from a personnel acquisition standpoint. All right, so you've got a 34-year-old slugger who's a free agent, and he's diminished in the field, but he can still swing a bat, still give you 30 home runs. All right, so you got that guy. And there's plenty of those guys out there.
We have one this year, Pedro Alvarez, who you would never put in the field.
Right.
He's a defensive liability. He currently is second on the team in home runs, second on the team in RBIs. But with no DH, he has no job.
And as a result, no National League team will sign that guy because he's a liability. You can't afford to pay him what an American League team can afford to pay him to be an everyday DH. You can't afford to pay him as a pinch hitter to do the same job at that age. Now, the Nats went out and signed Matt Adams because Matt Adams can play first base, he can play left field. He's not a stellar left fielder, but he did rob a guy of a home run a couple weeks ago. So, but he's also in his late 20s. So he's a few years away from that unuseful part of his defensive career. But there are plenty of guys on American League rosters that no National League team will ever touch who get to be productive season long. And even if in interleague play, all they get to do is play in the American League Park, or in the World Series only get to play in the American League Park, they're at least on the roster, whereas National League teams don't even have that guy. So to me, that's a disadvantage. You're not, those are guys that can swing a bat for you, can do some damage for you, that you just don't even have on on National League rosters. And so that from that standpoint, that's a big disadvantage. Now on the other side, National League hitters, or National League pitchers, I should say, yeah, they're taking batting practice more regularly, certainly, than American League pitchers are, but not much more regularly. They're still preparing. 98% of their time spent is preparing to. They're throwing in the bullpen. They're stretching. They're lifting. They're running, and they're also studying opposing lineups. They're charting pitches, just like American League pitchers are. And oh, by the way, yeah, I got to go in there and get a few swings in batting practice just so that when I get in the game, I don't embarrass myself at least. But they still have the same issues running the bases. Potentially getting injured swinging. Last year, actually, Max Scherzer famously hit a 3-run homer in a game against the Miami Marlins in the second inning of a game and had to leave the start early with a 6-0 lead because on the 3-run homer, he actually injured a muscle in his ribs and actually had to miss a couple starts as a result of that. And it set him back, and who knows, late in the season, he falters in the playoffs. Who knows what kind of impact that had on Max Scherzer, who eventually won the Cy Young Award, but hitting a home run even, set his season back a good bit. So, the National League guys, they're exposing their pitchers to that on a regular basis. And that's a disadvantage to me. Plus, yeah, then you still have those guys. I mean, it's a different quality game then for the fans. You've got a guy in the lineup who's not a full-time hitter. He's much more qualified, Scott, than you or I are. Now, of course, the pitcher on a Little League team, the pitcher on a Babe Ruth team, that's the best athlete on the field. The pitcher also plays shortstop. He's usually the power hitter on the team. The issue isn't that they can't swing the bat. It's just that they don't do it very often, and they certainly aren't studying opposing pitchers to figure out, hey, on 2-2, is he going to throw me a change, or is he going to throw me a slider, is he going to throw me a fastball up, like hitters are doing on a regular basis, because they're thinking about pitching. So I think National League teams have their own disadvantages, plus then the whole aspect of, the managers have to think differently in terms of, late inning situations. Do you take a guy out for his bat to put a pinch hitter in? If it's a 2-1 game in the 7th inning and you're down 2-1, do you take your guy out a little sooner than you would otherwise because you've got to get a bat in the lineup to maybe get some runs generated? American League managers don't have to think the same way at all. If the pitch count's good, you leave him in the game because he's not batting. So there are some things there that are a disadvantage. And also, yes, the National League teams in American League parks get to have an extra bat, but a lot of National League teams carry 14 pitchers these days. They've only got 3 guys in reserve off the bench, everyday players, and so they're losing. They're putting a guy in a DH, but they're losing one of their position guys. So that kind of evens out a little bit too, I think. In the end, I think it ends up being a wash from the do American League teams or National League teams have a bigger disadvantage? I just think that so I get back to the just weirdness part of the game being played differently with a different set of rules.
Yes, I see that. There are. Maybe I should have said there are significantly more, in my opinion, significantly more disadvantages to the American League not having a DH, having to go into a National League ballpark. But the National League they have some disadvantages too. So the interesting story that I was reading, it was basically shortly after we did our last podcast. It was about is it time to do away with the DH? If you don't do away, if for some reason the insanity continues and the DH is still employed in the National League or that American League and not so in the National League, then one way to offset that is you got to get rid of interleague play. Interleague play was a novel idea. It was fun for about 4 or 5 years, and now the statistics are proving it out. Interleague play, unless you happen to be one of a handful of teams that has that natural geographic rivalry, Mets, Yankees, Cubs, White Sox, essentially that's about it. Because the Giants and Dodgers are in the same league, and the Dodgers in Anaheim are really not rivals. They just never were. The interleague attendance is about 25% lower than if you throw the Yankees, Mets, White Sox, Cubs out of the equation. Interleague play is attendance is way down. So the novelty of that has certainly worn off. So if you take out interleague play, then you're only dealing with the absurd difference in rules for the World Series, which I think that's a major, still a major issue. But you're not throwing that into play. I think interleague is up to 18 games now. So the thought being is that if you're not going to do away with the difference in the rules between the two leagues, then now is the time to go away to get back to American League teams playing American League opponents and the San Diego Padres or the Toronto Blue Jays and the Miami Marlins.
I think there are smarter ways. See, I'll interject. I think there are smarter ways that baseball can do it. One, I don't think they're going to get rid of interleague play. And two, you said it earlier, Scott. The first thing about DH is the MLBPA. They're not going to get the MLBPA is not going to let anybody get rid of the DH because those are jobs that guys get. Right now, there's 15 American League teams. That's 15 jobs that you're giving away essentially. Now, obviously, other players will fill those jobs, but those are high-paying jobs too. Pedro Alvarez hitting 30 home runs is going to get paid more than some utility guy. So, and also another factor, you'd have to move a team because right now the way it's structured, because of interleague play being a given at this stage, you've got 15 American, 15 National League teams. That means every day there has to be an interleague game because you've got odd number of teams. So, so I think the solution is go DH. That's 15 more high-paying jobs in the MLBPA's perspective. That's good. It's also good from now. I'm again speaking totally as an NL guy, just as a National League guy. I've been a National League fan all my life. I think National League teams are actually disadvantaged because they have to have their pitchers hit and their pitchers get exposed to injury more than American League pitchers get exposed to injury. I also think that NL teams don't, because of the roster structure of not having a DH, they don't get to sign guys like Pedro Alvarez to their rosters. That's just, that's one less bat you've got in your lineup, one less chance for a bat in your lineup. And also the quality of the game then is dissipated because the pitcher is not a hitter. It's like making the quarterback kick field goals. That's the better analogy to me than the 5 downs or something like that. It's like making the quarterback. The quarterback has to run the ball 5 times a game, or your team gets docked penalty points, or he's got to kick a field goal, or your defensive lineman has to catch a pass, or you lose a game. I mean, it's making a guy do something that he's not really getting paid to do. Max Scherzer's not getting paid $33 million by the Nationals this year to leg out an infield single. He's getting paid to throw 7 innings and strike out 12 guys. And oh, by the way, he's got to swing a bat 3 times a game. It's just dumb. And so, change the rules, make them uniform. It'll make the game even more exciting. I think the game is in a great place, honestly. And I'll throw this out there, and Scott, all this talk about Major League Baseball games being 3 hours, we need to cut the time down. Why is it that Major League Baseball games being 3 hours is so bad, but NFL football games being 3 hours, nobody cares about that? They're the same length of game. I love baseball the way it is right now. I think it's being played great. I just wish we could fix this rule. If you fix this, I think you fixed a lot. And also then from interleague play perspective, I want more Nets I want more Mets Yankees. I want more O's Nationals and less Marlins Blue Jays, less Padres versus Red Sox. I want more of those games that mean something, those intersectional games, and less of those others. So jigger the schedule however you got to do it to make more of those games happen, not less.
Well, and the way you could do that, and this is the same story that I read, was that it might be time for a drastic change in the divisional alignment.
Yes.
Getting away from National League, American League, because now they're essentially Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And instead of having, you could have the Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox and maybe the Nationals and the Orioles. Yeah. They could all be in one division.
Yeah.
Not have to play a split games.
That more like the NBA. Now, NFL, of course, the AFC and the NFC both have East, Southeast, North, whatever divisions. But the NBA is set up pretty much geographically. I mean, I think Memphis might be still in the Western Conference for some reason and that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's geographical. And as a result, you don't have to force those matchups, calling them interleague play, because you've got teams aligned geographically. And actually, that'd be good for baseball too, because you and I both know we've spent a few nights recently with your O's on the West Coast, my Nats on the West Coast, staying up way too late trying to watch baseball games. You wouldn't necessarily get rid of all those games. You still would have some Yankees, Red Sox, O's trips to the West Coast, Nats trips to the West Coast. But, you'd play the bulk of your games against those natural rivals. We've already watered down the old divisions of baseball, the old National League, the old American League. We've moved teams around. We've changed the rules of the game. I agree. Why not? Completely realign everything. Bud Selig proposed that about 20 years ago. It didn't get very far. I think in this day and age, you might get further with that proposal.
Chris, again, I'm being giving credit where it's due. This is not really about all my original thoughts from the article I read. Before the advent of the wild card, Major League Baseball was the only sport, and we'll say of the 4 North American major sports: football, baseball, basketball, and hockey. I'm not going to mention soccer because I don't consider that a major sport. Major League Baseball was the only sport in which you could conceivably have the team with the second best record in the entire game not make the playoffs.
Right.
And they corrected that. They corrected that with a wild card. And they've since gone a little further and corrected it with the extra wild card.
Yes.
So, but is that when that came into play, they should have went ahead and took the next logical step and that's to do away with the silly divisional alignments that they have now, and go more with a geographic lineup and play. Just alternate each year like the NFL does, where you're not playing the same teams out of your divisions every year, but you're alternating it, and then you'll have your natural geographic, the Mets and the Yankees, the Orioles and the Nationals, the Mets and the Orioles. I mean, those are good draws. Philadelphia would be in that division itself. So I think I think all this is coming. I really do. I believe it's coming. One quick thing we talked about. The play, the time of the game. Both of us, you and I, are huge baseball fans. Baseball is my favorite sport of all. So obviously, the time it takes to play a game, especially when I'm there, I dread when the game is nearing an end because the fun's nearing an end for me. Yogi Bear had a great comment about how long it takes to play a game. If you're in a hurry, don't go.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
That's my odd. And I think what they're addressing with that is the millennials, the marginal fans that are the casual fans that are going to sit there once a week, twice a week, and watch a game that takes 3 hours and a half. They're not going to do it. Their attention span is not there. But yet, no one says anything about an NFL football game that they last well over 3 hours.
Yeah, and college football goes even further. And the best baseball game that I've seen in person in the last how many ever years, maybe my life, was the Nationals Dodgers Game 5 NLDS. I guess it was in 2015 or 2016. I was there in person. We sat in the left field bleachers. The game was 4 hours and 40 minutes long for 9 innings, and I had no idea it was that long until I got home. And I read somewhere that it was that long because people in the entire stadium got on its feet for the first pitch of the first inning and didn't sit down until the game was over in the bottom of the ninth. If it's a good, compelling game, it doesn't matter how long it is or how short it is. It's entertaining and it's got you gripped there, and just like that. And so, who cares? About a possible realignment. Yeah, I agree. I think it's coming, and it just makes me think. We've seen, this year maybe, both of our teams actually are falling behind where they're expected to be. But in past years, we've seen that both the Nats and the O's winning division championships. Can you imagine if we had Nationals Orioles in late September for a possible division championship for playoff berth? Those two teams were playing games not just for the sake of, like, they're going to be playing next week and again in a couple weeks. Next week in Baltimore and a couple weeks down the road in Washington. I'm actually going to be at one of those games in Washington. You imagine, instead of just playing for the sake of playing, what if they were playing for something that meant something? That would be so. You in terms of business, you could print money. That's how good that would be for business. Games that could mean something, or let's just say one of those two teams in the playoff mix, the others out of the playoff mix. Then you're buying a ticket because if you're an O's fan and the Nats are trying to win the Eastern Division Championship, you might get to buy a ticket and watch the O's knock the Nats out, or vice versa. I could watch the O's get knocked out if the Nats win. So, a chance to have those games mean something. You're printing money. It's so easy to make money that way. It's going to happen as a result.
And it would also even cover the possibility of the only way the Nats and the Orioles are going to play in postseason now is if they both make the World Series.
Right.
But you do away with the divisional lineups, the current format, then the Orioles and Nationals could easily play in a playoff series.
Yeah.
So it just increases the possibility that those two teams play each other in postseason. And again, you talk about someone having a key to the room that prints the money. They could have it. You talk about how that would light up this StubHub apps on the phone. My gosh. To me, it's logical. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen within a couple of years. It may happen if gradually become part of the National League. But it'll come into the National League. Eventually, the league will do some realigning, and the possibility. Maybe even the Yankees and Red Sox playing in a World Series. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
I mean, it could happen. It could happen if you did away with the two leagues. Now, that's kind of drastic. Either the NFL or currently the NBA doesn't do that. Like the way it stands now, most people by the fact they think that the NBA finals are being played right now. The Houston and Golden State, you cannot meet in the NBA finals. But I think baseball will be moving towards some. It might be gradual, incremental, but you're going to start seeing these things happen.
Yeah, the NBA, Adam Silver's actually proposed for down the line, at least consideration of seeding the playoffs, not Eastern, Western, etc., but having a 1 through 16 seeding. So, they've at least broached the topic. And yeah, if you start throwing out there the Yankees and Red Sox can play in the World Series, or anything like that, and baseball can say, wow, so we don't just have to show them in April on ESPN, we can show them in October on Fox. That's a possibility, and really across the board. I say the same thing about NFL. The Redskins and Ravens play once every 4 years. They should play every year. That makes no sense that they should only be playing once every 4 years. They should play every year, alternate those games. Again, you're printing money. It makes too much sense. I think all these things are going to happen. And so we started out on this trek, Scott. We were just trying to solve the DH rule. So what we've done now is we've got baseball realigning, maybe even the NBA and NFL realigning. The DH rule is a given, we figure. Also today, at least I proposed the NCAA Tournament expand to 128 teams. We've done a lot in this podcast to fix sports.
I think we've done a great job. Now we just need to maybe address the one and done rule in college basketball. That can be up next. We got to do something to get through the football season.
Okay, so we'll save that one for next week, yes, because that's another good one to get into, and there's a lot of stuff around that one, kind of like this DH rule, which led us to so many different things. So let's save that one for next week. And see, there you go. You're getting us closer. We're edging towards June. We've only got to get to middle of August, and then we're good. So I think I'll break us off there. And thanks for our listeners out there and if you have any thoughts about any of these things we brought up, a lot of stuff today to chew on. Email me at AugustaFreePress2@gmail.com. You can tweet me at AugFreePress, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. For Scott German, I'm Chris Graham. Let's sign off, as we always do. Wahoo wah.